Mr. Rude by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Rude is rude. He is very rude. He is very, very rude. He is worth very, very rude. He was extraordinarily rude. When you meet somebody, you might think to yourself that a person has a large nose, but you wouldn't say to that, would you? Because that would be rude, wouldn't it? Well, Mr. Rude just blurted out, "Big nose!" But you want to stop there. Oh no, not Mr. Rude. Big nose! With a nose like that, you can back up the floor! Can you imagine facing his head with somebody? Well, I hope you can't. He was the same with everybody. If he met somebody who was overweight, he would shout, "Fatty! You're supposed to take the food off the plate. What? Eat that plate as well." When he was driving along in his car, he would yell rude things at the people he passed by. Mr. Rude was a horrible man who didn't have a nice thing to say to anybody, and not surprisingly, nobody liked him. One day, Mr. Rude met little Miss Tiny, or not so much met as nearly trod on her. "Good morning," said little Miss Tiny. "Look at the size of you!" exclaimed Mr. Rude. "Squirt! You're starting to squash on my thumb!" Poor little Miss Tiny burst into tears and ran home. Behind a tree, on the other side of the lane, Mr. Happy was looking anything but happy. He had heard and everything. The next morning, Mr. Happy was outside at Mr. Rude's house, suitcase in hand. Mr. Happy knocked on Mr. Rude's front door. "Go away!" shouted Mr. Rude. Mr. Happy knocked again. Mr. Rude opened the door. "Can't you read?" said Mr. Rude, pointing to his doormat. Mr. Rude's doormat did not say welcome, like everybody else's doormat. Well, Mr. Rude had crossed out welcome and then in large black letters had written "Go away" underneath. Mr. Happy smiled, barred past Mr. Rude, and went into the living room. "Get out!" shouted Mr. Rude. Mr. Happy smiled an even larger smile and sat down in the armchair. Mr. Rude exploded. He ranted and raged for half an hour, but Mr. Happy calmly at his room, smiling. Eventually, Mr. Rude went into the kitchen to make himself supper, laughing and into Mr. Happy. After his supper, Mr. Rude ranted and raved for a full hour, but whatever Mr. Rude called him, Mr. Happy took no notice. Finally, Mr. Rude turned out the light and went upstairs without offering Mr. Happy a bed for the night. When Mr. Rude came down in the morning, Mr. Happy was still there, still smiling. "Okay, I give in," cried Mr. Rude. "What do you want?" "Breakfast would be nice," said Mr. Happy. "Please." Mr. Rude made breakfast for him. It was the first time in Mr. Rude's life that he had ever done anything for somebody else. In fact, in the first time he had ever asked anybody what they wanted. "Thank you," said Mr. Happy when he had finished. "Right, you can go now," demanded Mr. Rude. And Mr. Happy did not budge. Mr. Rude ranted and ranted, but he ended up making lunch for Mr. Happy and supper, and even offered Mr. Happy a bed for the night. Mr. Happy stayed for the fourth night. So slowly, the ranting and raging became less and less. Mr. Rude discovered he had something that he had never known he possessed. Manners. When it was time for Mr. Happy to leave, he shook Mr. Rude his hand and said, "Thank you so much, Mr. Rude. I really enjoyed my stay." Mr. Rude beamed and laughed that he was made as wide as Mr. Happy's and found himself saying, "And so did I." Mr. Rude was a changed man. "Burp," belched Mr. Rude. Well, almost.